Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here, and I could not wait tonight. I was so excited. And we're going to give everybody just a little bit of time to get in here, get comfortable, say hello if you are new here in the crypt. Definitely let us know you're here and let us know where you're from. We always love new victims here in the crypt. And I've got a good one for you tonight. One that some of you guys may have heard of it, but thought it'd be fun. We're going to kind of go into a little bit of mystery, a little bit of true crime, a little bit of horror. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Um, yeah, so come on in and get comfortable. And I'll see who is in the chats for the moment while we wait for everybody to get in here. So we have Stephen. Hi, Stephen P. Kitty Cat. So glad you're here. We have Wild Bill. Hi, Wild Bill. How are you? And of course, everybody, our own resident demon and devil, Hexus. So glad you're here. And Aka, our Winnebago. Our Winnebago is here. So we're super excited about that. And yeah, and you guys, please, please, please share out. One of the best things that you can do, and it's absolutely free to support your favorite streamers and podcasters, is to share the content. So yeah, do all the things, all the sharings and the little emojis down there and all that kind of stuff, because Facebook likes to see that. And yeah, we're going to get started here in just a minute. I hope everybody has had a great week. I have been very, very busy. And I think that's about it. So, oh, we have new Mrs. Grossman and Monte for class president, merch in our stores over on Teespring. So go check that out. Support the Bunnies of Chaos. Well, maybe not so much the Bunnies of Chaos. They're assholes. But definitely Monte. We love Monte. Monte always saves the day. So go over there and grab you some Monte merch. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started. And let's just see. I've got a couple more comments right here real quick. Yes, and Hexus is almost recovered. We are so glad. We're so glad he's feeling better. We are so glad. So we were worried about him. Even devils, just sometimes they're feeling under the weather. So we're glad he's feeling better. All right, so what we're going to talk about tonight, I know last time we talked about the sea. We went to sea and talked about the custom of the sea and cannibalism and all that kind of pretty disgusting stuff. But it was a lot of fun. But this time we're going to talk about the Wild West. We're going to be sticking around the 1800s. And it's just a pretty cool story. So let's go ahead and put ourselves kind of in the mindset. It is post-Civil War. And so post-Civil War America was, in many ways, a nation still in torment and deeply mourning the tremendous number of deaths. Some estimate somewhere around 650,000 plus deaths and missing. Now, because some young men just simply never returned. So whether they died or went out west or what have you, nobody really knows. Now, in some communities, as many as 25% or more of the men under 30 having been killed in the war, and as other survivors returning home with missing limbs and other physical problems, they all carried their own dark memories of war and the aftermath that followed it. It's a very tumultuous time for like the southern states and things like that. It was just a bad time. It was a bad time for us as a nation, to be honest with you. Now, nearly all families suffered, leaving many in our nation emotionally vulnerable. Now, this would kind of set up kind of middle ways and post-Civil War. A lot of people think and kind of give like the Victorian era, kind of the beginning of the spiritual movement, but it actually really became into its own thing, especially here in the United States. I know Europe was a little bit different, But during the Civil War, and especially after, because you did have a lot of people that, like I said, were emotionally vulnerable. Now, like I said, enter the American spiritualist movement. Now, many historians believe that spiritualism, which had been somewhat a stagnant movement in previous decades, convinced its followers that mere mortals were able to communicate with the dead. As the death tolls mounted, spiritualism as well was well established by the time the Civil War ended, and spiritualists enjoyed even greater demand for their services. When you consider that the 1860 census showed only 31 million people living in the US, pretty much everyone had a reason to go to one. Now, the post-Civil War era was a time of great uncertainty for many, many looking for a new start and to leave old memories behind them. In the decades after the Civil War, Americans poured across the Mississippi River in record numbers, no longer simply crossing over the continent for new imagined Edens in California or Oregon. This was land that drew the most migrants to the West this time. They now settled in the vast heart of the continent, as family farmers and farms were to be the backbone of the agricultural economy and expanding into the West after the Civil War. Now, in 1862, Northerners in Congress passed the Homestead Act, which allowed male citizens or those who declared their intent to become citizens to claim federally owned lands in the West. Now, settlers could head west, choose a 160-acre surveyed section of land, file a claim, and begin improving the land by plowing fields, building houses and barns, or digging wells. And after a 5-year period of living on the land, they could apply for the official title deed to that land. Now, hundreds of thousands of Americans used the Homestead Act to acquire said land. The treeless plains that had once been considered unfit for settlement became the new agricultural mecca for land-hungry Americans. So there's no wonder many moving west, hoping for a new beginning and a brighter future. And as these people moved west, of course, so did the spiritual movement. But something else moved with them, something much older and much darker. It was evil. Now, in order to get there, the Great Osage Trail, also known as Osage Trace or the Caw Trace, was one of the more well-known ways. Now, these Native American trails, and we've got to have a little context here so you kind of understand what was going on at the time, through the countryside of what are today called the Midwest and the Plain States of the U.S., were pathways originally created by herds of buffalo or other migrating wildlife, also referred to as medicine trails. Now, the Great Osage Trail, which in 1825 became known as the first phase of the Santa Fe Trail, extending from central Missouri near Franklin and Boonville, Missouri, westward, shadowing the route of the Missouri River, and then turning southward through Independence, Missouri, into Kansas. We're going to talk about Kansas here in a minute because Kansas is where this takes place. But I have a whole bunch of comments, so let me get in there and see what's going on real quick, and then we'll get back to it. Hi, Raven. How are you? So glad you were able to make it. All right, so Wild Bill says, they say more lives were lost in the war between the states than was lost in World War I and World War II combined. I would think it would be very, very close, to be honest with you, Wild Bill. I really do. I mean, I know that the amount of citizens that we had at the time during the Civil War was probably much less than World War I and World War II. We were fighting each other at that point. So yeah, there were some other elements that were involved in our Civil War, but for the most part, yeah, it's brother against brother and, family against family. So And then we have Joey, and toilet seat. Sip. All right. That's what I'm here for, Joey, is to scare you. And then PBDC TV. Yeah, we laugh at the rude ass people. So it gets us views. Thank you. So anyway, so what we were talking about. So we were talking about the Great Osage Trail. All right, so like I said, we're in Kansas now, and again to get a little bit more context, because this is where our story is going to take place. And it's going to take place in Labette County, the township of Osage, and Cherryvale, Kansas, to be exact. Now, a fun fact, though, the famous Route 66, or Route 66, through southern Missouri, Ozarks, follows the route of what was once the Osage Trail. But before we start the story, and again, I wanted to add some additional information so that we do have that context. Now, in the 19th century, Kansas was a bloody place, especially before the Civil War, as free soilers and slavery advocates duked it out for control of the new territory. And I had read something about Kansas, and actually there was some sort of blurt in the voting and election process to where Kansas at one point actually had 2 state governors, and they were completely 2 sides of the coin. So this is probably where they're talking about the free soilers, and of course the slavery advocates were constantly in battle during that time for the control of that territory in Kansas. Now, once Kansas declared itself with the Union and the Civil War began to rage, the bloody battles continued. Now, after the Civil War, as pioneers began to head westward along the many trails through Kansas, murder and mayhem persisted as hardened men from the battlefields, grown used to violence, continued their violent ways along the overland trails and in the many cow towns. Now, if not accosted by road agents, travelers also had to be concerned about Indian tax, rightfully upset for the loss of land that was being taken from them. Now, southeast Kansas in particular was known as a very rough area. Though most of us know of Dodge City's wicked ways, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and the deadly gunfight of the Daltons in Coffeyville as well took place during this time period that we're talking about. The many outlaws and gunfighters who spent time in the Sunflower State. However, few are aware of a family of mass murderers living in a supposed quiet life near the small town of Cherryvale. This is who we're going to talk about. Now, in the spring of 1871, the body of a man named Jones was discovered in Drum Creek. His skull was crushed and his throat was cut. Then, in February of 1872, the bodies of 2 men were found who had the same injuries as Jones. The area, already wildly known for horse thieves and villains, a body or 3 was commonplace and simply written off as foul play. It just really wasn't that big of a deal at that time. There was a lot of murder and mayhem going on during that point. And actually, I don't think it was till much later that Kansas actually had a working law enforcement. I mean, you had, like your marshals and things like that, but you didn't actually have an active police force of what we know of as police for Kansas till sometime after all this stuff happened. Now, by 1873, the reports of missing people who had passed through the area had become so common that travelers began to avoid the trail altogether. And in the winter of 1872, George Newton Lonker left Independence, Kansas with his infant daughter, Mary Ann, to resettle in Iowa. They were never seen again. To say people were unsettled would be an understatement. So in the spring of 1873, Loncor's former neighbor, a Dr. William Henry York, concerned over their disappearances, went looking for them and questioned homesteaders along the trail. Eventually, York reached Fort Scott and on March 9th began the return journey home to Independence. However, he too would never arrive, seemingly swallowed up by the vast prairie. So we're going to talk about some people, but I want to see what's going on in the chats real quick, and then we're going to get into the Benders. Hi, Dizzy. How are you? Hi, Lucas. It's good to have you here. And look, guys, if you guys are new, let us know because we always like new victims here in the crypt. And we want to welcome you properly. All right. So let's talk about some people. All right. So in October of 1870, 5 families of spiritualist homesteaders in and around the township of Osage in northwestern Labette County, approximately 7 miles northwest of where Cherryville was established 7 months later, they basically entered the area. Now, one of these families was John Bender Sr., John Bender Jr., who had registered a 160-acre land allotment located adjacent to the Great Osage Trail, which was then the only open road for traveling further into the west in that particular area. Now, after a cabin, a barn, and a corral were built in the fall of 1871, Mr. Bender's wife and supposed daughter arrived, an Elvira Bender, which is just kind of a cool name, and daughter Kate arrived. Keeping mostly to themselves, the Benders appeared to be simply struggling homesteaders who worked hard to earn their living like any other person or pioneer in that area. Now, John Bender Sr. was around 60 years old and spoke little English. What little he did speak was so guttural that it was usually unintelligible. He was just kind of grunted. Standing over 6 feet tall, John was a giant of a man who, because of his piercing black eyes set deeply under a huge bushy brows, earned him the nickname of Old Beetle-Browed John. His ruddy face, mostly covered by a heavy beard and sullen expression and long hair, often led to him being described as a wild and woolly-looking man. Now, Elvira Bender, who was also allegedly spoke little English, was 55 years old and a heavy-set woman who was so unfriendly and had such sinister eyes, people say, that her neighbors began to call her the she-devil. To add to their fierce look, Ma Bender, as most people would refer to her, also claimed to be a medium who could speak with the dead and boiled herbs and roots that she declared could be used to cast charms or wicked spells. Her husband and son were said to have been even feared her themselves, as she ran the house with an iron hand. Now, the Benders were widely believed to be of German descent and immigrants, though no documentation or definitive proof of their relationship to one another or where they were born or where they came from has ever been found. Now, John Bender Sr. was from either, they believe, Germany or the Netherlands, and is thought by some to have been born a John Flicklinger. According to contemporary newspapers, Elvira was born Almira Hill Mark, often misreported as Meck, in the Arendac Mountains. She married a Simon Mark, with whom she claimed to have had 12 children. Now, again, all this is supposed. They don't have actual proof exactly where these people were from, and really who they were, or really their relationships, to be honest. Now, later it is said she was to have married a William Stephen Griffith. Elvira was suspected of murdering several husbands, but none of these rumors were ever proven. John Bender Jr. was around 25 years old and actually rather handsome, with auburn hair and a mustache, and he spoke English fluently with a little bit of a German accent. John was prone to laughing aimlessly and it led many to consider him almost as a half-wit, or what they would refer to back then as a half-wit. Now, Kate Bender, who was around 23, was very cultivated and attractive and spoke English very well. though she did have a little bit of an accent. A self-proclaimed healer and psychic, she distributed flyers of advertising or advertisements of her supernatural powers and her ability to cure illnesses. Now, Kate was believed to be Elvira's fifth daughter. Some of the Benders' neighbors claimed that John and Kate, however, were not actually brother and sister, but actually husband and wife. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. It gets a little incestuous here in just a moment. So you can kind of see, I think probably when they did, what was it, Wrong Turn? I know a lot of those types of movies are based kind of on the, was it Swanee Bean Clan? I see a lot of Bender, kind of, I don't know where they get their inspiration for on some of these, because they're kind of a really screwed up family. So, but let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then we're going to get to our halfway point and go to an ad. Roots Bleed Red is here. Hi, Jackal. How are you? So glad you're here. And Dizzy says, sorry I'm late. I had to do a live. No problem at all. Glad you're here. And guys, please share out. Again, that is the best way to support streamers and what they do. It costs absolutely nothing. Just hit those share buttons and those follow buttons and all those little heart icons and all that kind of stuff. The social media platforms do like to see that. So, all right. So let's talk about Kate for just a minute. So, like I said, she was believed to be Elvira's fifth daughter. Now, she also conducted seances and gave lectures on spiritualism. And Kate's popularity kind of became a large attraction for the Bender Inn. And we're going to get into that too, kind of what they do other than working the fields and things like that. They've taken on a little bit of a different way of making money. So now the petite auburn-haired beauty had a desire for notoriety and often advocated for free love and justification for murder in her lectures. Along with her desire for fame, she also craved wealth and position. Though her beauty and social skills gained her popularity with the locals, her actions began to cause them to say that she was satanic. Kate proclaimed herself responsible to no one save herself. She also professed to be a medium of spiritualism and delivered lectures on that subject. Now, in her lectures, she publicly declared that murder might be a dictation for good, that in what the world might deem villainy, her soul may read bravery, nobility, and humanity. She advocated for free love and denounced all social regulations for the promotion of purity and the prevention of carnality, which she called miserable requirements of self-constituted society. It is said she maintained carnal relations with her brother and boldly proclaimed her right to do so in the following words found in one of her lecture manuscripts. So there is proof that these people, existed. But the manuscript read, "Shall we confine ourselves to a single love and deny our natures their proper sway? Even though it be a brother's passion for his own sister, I say it should not be smothered." Although the elder Benders kept to themselves, Kate and her brother regularly attended Sunday school in the nearby Harmony Grove. Now, when the Benders opened their store and inn in 1871, many travelers would stop for a meal or supplies. The cabin was divided into 2 rooms by a canvas wagon cover, kind of just, that cover that went over the wagons. The Benders used the smaller room in the rear of the living quarters, while the front room was converted into a general store where a few dry goods were sold. The front section also contained a kitchen and a dining table where the travelers could stop for a meal or even spend the night. Elvira and Kate Bender even planted a 2-acre vegetable garden and an apple orchard north of the cabin. However, some of those men who frequently carried large sums of cash with the intentions of settling, buying stock, or purchasing a claim began to go missing. And when friends and family began to look for them, they could trace them as far as Big Hill Country, which was in the southeast part of Kansas, before they could find no trace of the lost travelers. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to a quick break, and then we'll be right back. And we're back. All right, so let's see. We got trolls on Twitch, and it's found some things out about them. Hey, are we going to play that game, Hexus? Are we going to play that game, Name That Troll, and somebody wins something? Because, you know, we do have merch. Name that troll. Name that troll. I think we should turn into a game. I think that would be amazing. All right, let's see what's going on in the chats. Yes, Stephen. Cannibal Hillbillies. I mean, I see the Swanee Bean story. I absolutely do. Hi, Calvin. But I do see a lot of kind of the benders in this. And there's actually a really good movie. I think it was put out in 2008 or 2016. It's kind of like, I don't even call it a B movie. It was pretty good. It's actually pretty good. Called The Bloody Benders. And I believe I found it on Prime. Either it was Prime or Paramount, if you got Paramount Plus. And it's a really good. I mean, they stick pretty much to the story, because there's just not a whole lot that is known about these people other than the horrible crimes that they committed. Yeah, it's a pretty good movie. So, but yes, Cannibal Hillbillies, sort of. I guess these would be Cannibal Pioneers. Yes, we can. We can. We could play the troll game. Let's see. Oh, that's so funny. Hi, Nadine. How are you? All right. So she says, "Hey guys, I'm at Cradle of Filth show. Can't hear. You look. You have fun. You can catch it on replay." Yeah, we definitely need to come up with a troll game. But yeah, if you can name that troll, and we'll send you merch. We'll send you merch. How about that? Name that troll. Name that troll. All right. So where were we? So so what exactly did the Benders do? You know, other than just be creepy and incestuous? Well, the danger of the Benders and the danger of stopping at their store and inn was when you dined with them. Dining with the Benders came when seated with your back to the canvas wall. When a guest stayed at the Benders Bed and Breakfast Inn, the host would give them, of course, the seat of honor. And the guest would be seated at the table in that position, basically with his back to the canvas. And also unknowingly, a trap door to the cellar. With the victim's back to the curtain, Kate would distract the guest while John Bender or his son came from behind the curtain and struck the guest on the right side of the skull with a hammer. And it wasn't just a little hammer, but they did use different size hammers. So, and there is a Bender museum, and I'll touch on that just a little bit. Now, one of the women would cut the victim's throat to ensure death, and the body was then dropped through the trap door. Once in the cellar, the body would be stripped and later buried somewhere on the property, often in the orchard or garden. So they made them into plant food. Although some of the victims were wealthy, others carried little known value on them, and it is surmised that the Benders had killed them simply for the sheer thrill. Now, Kate drew a number of victims to the door with her offers of spiritual communication, and her brother often accosted travelers on nearby roads. He would strike up a conversation with them and convince them that a night spent at their end was preferable to journeying on. The system of murder worked well for more than 18 months. Now, testimony from people who had stayed at the Bender's Inn and managed to escape before they could be killed appeared to support the presumed execution method of the Benders. William Pickering said that when he had refused to sit near the wagon cloth because of the stains on it, Kate Bender had threatened him with a knife, whereupon he fled the premises. Also, a Catholic priest claimed to have seen one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer, at which point he became uncomfortable and quickly departed. Two men who had traveled to the inn to experience Kate Bender's psychic powers stayed for dinner, but had refused to sit at the table next to the cloth, instead preferring to eat their meals in the main shop counter. Kate then became very abusive towards them, and shortly afterwards, the Bender men emerged from behind the cloth. At this point, the customers felt uneasy and decided to leave and a move that almost certainly saved their lives. Now we're going to talk about Dr. York. He was the one that went looking for his neighbor and his neighbor's 18-month-old child. Now, Dr. York had two brothers, Ed York, living in Fort Scott, and Colonel Alexander M. York, who was a Civil War veteran, lawyer, and a member of the Kansas State Senate, which is really a bad idea on the Bender side. Both knew of William's travel plans, and when he failed to return, an all-out search began for the missing doctor. Colonel York, leading a company of 50 men, questioned every traveler along the trail and visited all the area homesteads. And what I had heard, because I did listen to a few like history podcasts related to this particular subject, is that basically when it says Colonel York questioned every traveler along the trail and visited all homesteads, he pretty much beat the shit out of everybody until he got an answer he wanted, or he came to the conclusion they didn't know anything about. So he was very persuasive. You couldn't just say yes or no. If he didn't believe you, you were in for an ass kicking. All right, so let's see. On March 28th in 1873, Colonel York arrived at the Bender Inn with a Mr. Johnson, explaining to them that his brother had gone missing and asked if they had seen him. They admitted to Dr. York to Mr. York that Dr. York had stayed with them. However, they suggested the possibility that he had run into trouble with Indians or some sort of villainry after he had left. Now, Colonel York agreed that this was possible and remained for dinner. Now, on April 3rd, Colonel York returned to the inn with armed men after being informed that a woman had fled from the inn after Elvira Bender had threatened her with knives. Now, allegedly, Elvira, who allegedly could not understand English, while the younger Bender denies this claim, when York repeated the claim, Elvira became enraged. So in other words, when Colonel York questioned her about this lady, running out of the inn screaming and yelling, they denied it. And of course, Elvira, I can't speak English, she kind of afraid that. But when York repeated the claim, Elvira became enraged, said the woman was a witch who had cursed her coffee and ordered the men to leave her house, revealing for the first time that her sense of the English language was much better than she ever let on. Now, before York left, Kate asked him to return alone the following Friday night, and she would use her clairvoyant abilities to help him find his brother. And we're going to stop right there real quick so that we can see what's going on in the chats. Hi, John. How are you? Glad to see you here. Yes, she's a witch. She floats. I mean, I know we all have, it's just an epidemic where witches come around and curse your coffee. Yes. Yes, a few times. Exactly. See, it's happened to John. John, I've had cursed coffee a few times. Yeah, that's when you get the bubble gut, when you have the cursed coffee. Let's see. And then Roots Bleed Red says, my heart's on fire for Elvira. Giddy up. Papa, papa, bow, bow. Oh my goodness. Elvira. Oh my word. Yeah, pretty much. 2 + 2 is 9, and you will answer me properly. Oh my goodness. So Akash says she has a guess, but the game is guess who we think it is. Oh, okay. Well, you guys, since I'm up here running my teeth, since I don't really have lips anymore, you guys let everybody know what the game is, like how we play it. So I'm just saying, name the troll. So, but there's merch to give away. There's merch to give away. So, all right. So where were we? All right. So, okay. The men with York were convinced the Benders and a neighbor family, the Roches, were guilty and wanted to hang them all. However, York, being a state senator, he did insist, even though he didn't mind beating the shit out of everybody to get answers, he still believed in a semblance of law. So he did wind up insisting that evidence must first be found before they actually just went around and started, hanging and lynching people. Now, around the same time, neighboring communities began to make accusations that the Osage community was responsible for the disappearances, and Osage Township then eventually arranged a meeting in Harmony Grove in the Harmony Grove schoolhouse. 75 locals attended the meeting, including Colonel York and both John Bender Sr. and John Bender Jr. After discussing the disappearances, including that of William York, they agreed to obtain a search warrant to search every single homestead between Big Hill Creek and Drum Creek. 3 days after the township meeting, a man by the name of Billy Toll was driving cattle past the Bender's property when he noticed that the inn seemed eerily quiet, almost abandoned, and the farm animals were unfed. Toll reported the fact to the township trustees, but due to not only intimate weather, things moved slowly out there. It's not like you call 911 or call, like I said, there was no real police at that time. You basically had to, rely on like these town trustees, Pinkertons, I guess, if you had them maybe, or marshals, that kind of thing. So several days had lapsed before the abandonment could be investigated. Now, the township trustees called for volunteers, and several hundred turned out to form a search party that included Colonel York. When the party arrived at the inn, they found that the cabin itself was empty. It was empty of food, clothing, and personal possessions. That's when they noticed a bad odor coming from the cabin and traced it to the trap door underneath a bed, which had been nailed shut. After opening the trap, the party found an empty room underneath that was roughly 6 feet deep and 7 feet square at the top by 3 feet square at the bottom. So it wasn't a huge area, but it was big enough probably for a body or two. The floor was covered in clotted blood. They broke up the stone slab itself, which was part of the basement floor, with sledgehammers, but found no bodies there and determined that the smell was from the blood that had soaked into the soil, the surrounding soil and stone. The men then physically lifted, this tells you how big the cabin was. I mean, how they packed all this stuff into a little bitty cabin is beyond me, to where you could actually call it an inn, and it's so small you can pick it up and move it. But they wound up physically lifting the cabin and moving it to the side to dig under it, but there they found no bodies either. They then probed the ground around the cabin with a metal rod, especially in the disturbed soil of the vegetable garden and orchard, where Dr. York's body was found later that evening, buried face down with his feet barely below the surface. The probing continued until midnight with another 9 suspected grave sites marked before the men were satisfied they had found them all and retired for the night. The next morning, however, another 8 bodies were found in 7 of the 9 suspected graves. While one was found in the well, along with a number of body parts, all but one had their heads bashed in with a hammer and throats cut, except, of course, for that of the body of George Newton Longcore's infant daughter, Mary Ann. No injuries sufficient to cause death were found, and it was speculated that she had either been strangled or buried alive. On all bodies except that of Mary Ann, many of the bodies had also been as to what the paper described as indecently mutilated, possibly suggesting genital trauma or mutilation. More than a dozen bullet holes were found in the roof and the side of the cabin, and the media speculated that some of the victims, even after being hit in the head with a hammer, had attempted to fight back, of course, unsuccessfully. As well as the bodies, they found 3 hammers, an 8-day clock, which is like a mantle clock, sort of, which, upon further examination, held a bloody knife. They found pieces of jewelry, some of Kate Bender's occult advertising broadsides scattered along the floor, and a German Bible. And I found the German Bible kind of interesting. Now, the Roman Catholic prayer book was found in the house with notes inside written in German, which were later translated. The text reads, Johanna Bender, born July 30th, 1848. John Gebhardt came to America on July 1st, 18 ? Big Slaughter Day, Jan 18th, and hell departed. Now, the victims that were found were, and I'm just going to go by dates of what they believe. May 1871, Mr. Jones, body found in Drum Creek with a crushed skull and cut throat. February, somewhere around the 2nd or 3rd of 1872, 2 identified men found on the prairie in February with crushed skulls and throats cut. December of 1872, Ben Brown from Howard County, Kansas. Buried in the apple orchard. December 1872, W.F. McCourty. He was a retired colonel of the 123rd Illinois Infantry, and a wagon with a team of horses was declared missing. He was found. December 1872, Henry McKenzie. He was a relocation to Independence from Hamilton County, Indiana, as well as his matching team of horses had gone missing. He was found. December 1872, John Boyle from Howard County, Kansas. His packing mare, as well as $850, and his saddle was missing. He was the one that was found in the Bender's well. Now, either the 8th or 9th of December 1872, George Newton Longcore and his 18-month-old daughter, Mary Ann. Contemporary newspapers report his name as either George W. Longcore or John Launcher, while Mary Ann is similar, reported as being either 8 years old or 18 months old. A lot of information, though, says that the 18-month-old may have been more correct. According to the 1870 census, George and his wife, Mary Jane, were neighbors of actually Charles Ingalls and a family in Independence, while his wife's parents lived 2 houses away. After the death, however, of his infant son, Robert, from pneumonia in May of 1871, and his 21-year-old wife, Mary Jane, following the birth of Mary Ann several months later. So both his son and his wife had died. George was likely returning to the home of his parents, an Anthony and Mary Hughes Longcore in Lee County, Iowa. I do find it interesting, though, that he was actually a neighbor of the Ingalls that wrote Little House on the Prairie. In preparation for his return to Iowa, George had purchased a team of horses from his neighbor, a Dr. William Henry York, who later went looking for George and was also murdered. Both were Civil War veterans. The daughter was thought to have been, like I said, buried alive, but this was, it's still kind of unproven. They say either strangled or buried alive. No injuries were found on her body, and she was fully clothed, including mittens and a hood. Both were buried together in the apple orchard, which I think is just sad. Now, December 1872, John Greery, he was buried in the apple orchard. December 1872, Red Smith, he was buried in the apple orchard. December 1872, Abigail Roberts, buried in the apple orchard. There's a lot of people. December 1872, various body parts. The parts did not belong to any of the other victims found and are believed to belong to at least 3 additional victims. What happened to the rest of them? No one knows. Now, December of 1872, during the search, the bodies of 4 unidentified males were also found in Drum Creek and the surrounding area. All 4 had crushed skulls and throats cut. One was believed to be a Mr. Jack Bogart, whose horse was purchased from a friend of the Benders after he went missing in 1872. And then, of course, the one that caused their demise, 1873, Dr. William York, missing. He was found buried in the apple orchard. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. There's a bunch of them, and then we're going to get into some more about the victims and stuff. All right. Yes, so Akash says, thank you all for joining us tonight. Please make sure to like, follow, share, and smash that bell, or even stab that bell. Mother would prefer you stab that bell to keep getting these awesome feeds. And then John says, some kind of feud like the Hatfield and McCoys. I think they were just crazy, to be honest with you, John. They enjoyed killing, because a lot of these people they killed had really nothing of value on them. Hi, Henry. How are you? Let's see. And yes, Roots Bleed Red says, thank you for joining us. Yes, even you trolls. We always appreciate the views. Please like, follow, and share. Absolutely. And then Hexa says, Charles Ingalls as in Little House on the Prairie. Yes, Charles Ingalls as in Little House on the Prairie was the neighbor of Longcore, which Longcore was the neighbor of York. So I guess they were all neighbors. So let's talk about the victims a little bit more. Now, by including the recovered body parts not matched to the bodies found, the finds were speculated to represent the remains of more than 20 victims. With the exception of Mackenzie and York, who were buried in Independence, their bodies were moved. And Mr. McCrotty, who was buried in Parsons, Kansas, none of the other bodies were ever claimed, and they were reburied at the base of a small hill 1 mile southeast of the Bender's Orchard, one of several at the location now known as the Bender Mounds. And you can still visit those today. The search of the cabin resulted in the discovery of 3 hammers. The hammers were a shoe hammer, a claw hammer, and a sledgehammer that appeared to match the indentations on some of the skulls. These hammers were given to the Bender Museum in 1967 by the son of Leroy Dick. Leroy Dick handed over them hammers, the Osage Township trustee who headed the search of the Bender property. The hammers were displayed at the Bender Museum in Cherryville, Kansas from 1967 to 1978, when the site was acquired for a fire station. When attempts were made to relocate the museum, it became a point of controversy, some locals objecting to the town being known for the Bender's murders. The Bender artifacts were eventually given to the Cherryville Museum, where they remain in a wall-mounted display case. A knife with a 4-inch tapered blade was reportedly found hidden, like I said, in the 8-day mantle clock in the Bender's house by Colonel York. In 1923, it was donated to the Kansas Museum of History by York's wife, but it is not on display. It still bears the reddish-brown stains on the blade. It can be seen upon request. Now, a historical marker describing the Bender's crimes is located in the rest area at the junction of U.S. Route 400 and U.S. Route 169 north of Cherryville, if there's anybody in that area that wants to check it out. Now, let's see what we have here. Yeah, so kind of getting into this just a little bit. Now, the connection to Little House on the Prairie. Now, the Ingalls family made famous with the books and television series. Laura Ingalls Wilder actually did mention the Bender family in some of her writings and speeches. Now, as a Kansas newspaper reported, that the crowd, so basically, like when all this was found out and the place was abandoned, it drew a lot of people, a lot of people. Now, a Kansas newspaper reported that a crowd was so incensed after finding the bodies that a friend of the Benders named Brockman, who was also among the onlookers, was hanged from a beam in the inn until unconscious, revived, interrogated, then hanged again. After the third hanging, they released him and he staggered home. One quoted as one who was drunken or deranged. Now, the word of the murder spread quickly, and more than 3,000 people, including reporters from as far away as New York City and Chicago, visited the site. And like the Benders themselves, simply, hold on, where am I at? Yeah, so they visited the site. Now, the Bender cabin was destroyed by souvenir hunters who took everything, including the bricks that lined the cellar and the stones lining the well. So basically, what happened is the whole cabin, the well, everything. They didn't know anything about like crime scene preservation, and with all these people showing up, they basically the whole homestead pretty much just disappeared without a trace. Very much like the Benders themselves, who disappeared without a trace. Now, the state senator, Alexander York, offered a $1,000 reward, which today would be equivalent to about $22,000 reward for the family's arrest. On May 17th, Kansas Governor Thomas A. Osborne offered a $2,000 reward, which would be around $45,000 for the apprehension of all four. Now, the remains of what was believed to be the 20 victims, like I said, found on the farm, with the exception of the 5 victims that I noted earlier, including Dr. York, being that those bodies had never, they were actually moved, but of the other ones, the bodies were never claimed. Again, they are buried at the base of a small hill nearby known as the Bender Mounds. Now, the whereabouts of the Bloody Benders may never be known and actually does remain one of the Old West's greatest mysteries. They simply just disappeared into the prairie. So that is the Bloody Benders. And let's see what's going on in the comments. And I made good time this time. We didn't go over this time. Hi, Mikey. I saw Mikey in here. Hi, Mikey. How are you? Yes, Mr. Leroy Dick Hexus. Good. So Henry said that he used his Bender hammer and hammered the bell so he can get a notification. Thank you. And then Christopher is in the chats from Channel 9. Hey, Mikey, or Christopher. For those of you that don't know, Christopher, Mikey, one and the same. And so John says they got away with it all. Yeah, they did. They simply disappeared. And there's very little known about, I mean, there were rumors, but nothing has ever been proven one way or the other. as to what may have happened to the Benders. Some believe that they did split up, and that the younger Benders headed to Mexico, whereas Pa Bender wound up committing suicide, and Ma Bender, I think, was arrested for some sort of crime. But again, that's never been proven. It's never been proven. And we have Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you? So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. It's kind of a sleeper true crime type thing. There's quite a bit of information out there. You just don't hear about it a lot. It's not as obscure as some of the things that I report to you guys, but it's still interesting nonetheless, and obscure enough, I would think. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, I know I'm not on a regular routine, and that's just because I am so busy. But I will be back. I don't know what my next topic will be, but it will be fun. Be assured of that. It will be fun and interesting and obscure and probably horrifying in some way or form or fashion. Let's see, what do we have coming up? I think tomorrow night we've got Roots Bleed Red. So make sure to check them out. I'm not really sure what topic they are talking about tonight. So if Akal wants to put that down there in the chats, to let everybody know what topic you guys will be talking about tomorrow night. That way they can make sure to tune in. Again, we always send out the event notification earlier in the day so that you can hit that remind button if you're going to be busy doing something, and want to ensure that you do get those notifications, because Facebook is just not really good with that. Or you can join the conversation over on Discord. They're very, very good about sending out notifications. We also on YouTube, you can go over there and subscribe. They're pretty good about sending out notifications as well. And actually, you can do all of that on our website. You can subscribe to our YouTube and go to our Discord. So yeah, just go to the website. That'll just be easier. So definitely check us out if you are new to our content. We're pretty fucking awesome. So definitely come back and see us again. And I will be back as soon as I can. Of course, Mr. Ghoul will be back, and I do believe that they have a new episode that's coming up Sunday. And then Hexus and Akal, I do believe, will be on later on Sunday for their show. So definitely check that out. And then we come back around to the beginning of the week again, and we're going to have a new episode from Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Yay! And then on Tuesdays, you can check out of the Ordinary. And then Wednesdays is Chatting with Akal. It's a really cool new show that she started. Really fun and interesting. It kind of is a little bit more involvement with the haunt community and a lot of the haunters, as far as, them introducing themselves and just kind of talk about why they got into what they do, why they love doing what they do, and where you can find them, because it won't be too much longer, and it's going to be spooky season, because for us, spooky season never ends, but it's official on September 1st. So definitely check that out if you have not seen her show yet. It's a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun last night. Even with some of the quirks with StreamYard, it was so much fun. So much fun. So, but yeah, thank you guys for joining us. And we will see you back here next time, whenever that will be. I will let you guys know. And pleasant nightmares. Good night.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. There is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Money DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Drink head